So we covered closures and ifs. And I want to close this module with some very important things about functions, or some nice methods and properties we can use with functions. For this, I will again just create a little dummy function here, which I will call message. And this will take a message as an input, let's say, and then simply again log it to the console. Now, of course, if I hit run, we won't see anything, but if I pass a dummy message into there and now I hit run, we see hi, of course. So that shouldn't be too surprising. However, inside a function, we also have access to a certain variable, if you want to call it like this. I can print out arguments. Now, arguments isn't a variable I created. I didn't create it anywhere. And what do you think I'll see if I now hit run? I get an object which basically, like an array, has key value pairs with just an index which is incrementing, and then the passed in argument. So hi here, of course, because I passed one argument. Now, what happens if I pass another argument? Even though this message here, of course, only takes one argument, this function only expects a message, nothing else. What do you think I'll now see if I hit run? Now I get both arguments, because in JavaScript, as explained earlier in this course, I'm not getting an error if I pass more arguments than expected. I'm of course not using them here, but I could use them. And with the arguments variable here, I very well could use it, because I could check if I do have the extra argument, or I could generally check how many arguments I got. And then I could simply access them like this, for example, to access the first argument. And I would print 10. So this gives me a way to, at runtime or during runtime, determine how many arguments I have, which arguments these are, and use them. Now, if I use this with 2 and try to access an argument I haven't passed into this function, what do you think I'll get now if I hit run? Well, I get undefined because I'm trying to access an argument which isn't there. So this arguments variable here kind of is like an array, even though it technically is an object here, where I can access my different arguments and use them. And this again gives me a way to dynamically expand the functionality of my function and, well, consider the number of arguments I got and even use them. Of course, I can also check how many arguments I got by accessing the length property. So now I get 2 because I passed 2 arguments here. So let's see arguments property here, or the arguments variable if you want to call it like that. What other useful helpers or things can we use with functions? Well, for example, I can get rid of this function call, and instead I could print message.name. What do you think we'll now see if I hit run? Message, because this is the name of the function. So I can access the name of a function. Now you might say, well, that is a bit stupid, right? I have the name here. Why would I access it here? Again, you might have some kind of functions you're creating dynamically during runtime or anything like that. And then, well, this could be very useful to use. It, of course, would also be useful if you have this case. So you create a new variable to which you assign this message function. And now what happens if I run this? What do I see in the console? Still message. So now I'm not referring to the name on the left of this name call or this name property, but to the real function which is bound to this variable. So this is why name could be useful to find out which function actually will get executed. And this might allow you to write more dynamic code, for example. I also have access to length. Now, what do you think we'll now see if I hit run? 1. And length refers to the number of arguments this function expects. It expects not the number of arguments it gets, because, well, it doesn't know with how many arguments you will call this function eventually. But it does know how many arguments it expects. And if I add numbers here, well, what will we see now? 2, of course, because we're now expecting 2 arguments. So this could also be very useful to, again, in a dynamic context where you, for example, loop through an array of functions, and for each function you want to find out how many arguments you have to pass. This is a great way to do it, or to find out how many arguments this function expects. Now here's something else. Consider I'm taking this function here, and I'm setting it equal to message variable, and I get rid of the name here. So this is the other way we can create functions, if you remember this. Now if I print the name, what do you think we'll now see? Actually nothing, because the name is looking for something here. So by setting up a function like this, we're basically binding an anonymous function, this part here, to a variable. And an anonymous function doesn't have a name, as well the name anonymous implies. Therefore, we're not able to print the name, because the name is not the variable name, but the name of the function, which isn't there. So that's important to keep in mind, that there is a tiny difference between both ways of setting up a function. If I turn this back and I print out this .name inside the function, and then I simply execute message, what do you think we'll now see? Well, not the function name. Here, I'm just referring to the name of, well, this app here, so to the global object, the window object name. So this name does not work. You can access the name outside of this function, not inside though. So that were some tiny but yet important additions about functions in JavaScript, and which built-in helpers or properties you can use to, well, enhance your functions or to write more dynamic code. It's very important to be aware of all the tools JavaScript offers you here. Therefore, this was a very important module to get you on the next level regarding function usage, so that you're now able to use closures to know what they are and what the advantages are, that you are able to use ifs and know what they are and what the advantages are, and that you're able to use all the built-in helpers provided by JavaScript.